Phil Spencer talks handheld, more games coming to PlayStation, and a lot more in a bombshell interview. Phil Spencer held down the B button and snuck into the Bloomberg offices where he held an interview with Dina Bass and company about kind of like what's going on with Xbox. And I gotta tell you, depending on where you sit in the Xbox universe of like, should Xbox like lock down and keep everything their own, or should Xbox worry about its long-tailed future after spending nearly $70 billion on Activision, yeah, you might come away a little upset. So let's dive into the details here because there's a lot of juicy nuggets that Phil Spencer talked about. So when it comes to acquiring more gaming studios, Phil Spencer says nothing is ever off the table. They're looking at like geographic diversity, including in Asia, he says might be worthwhile. But I think we can definitely rule out that any more mega acquisitions are more than likely off the table. He said, we're looking for technology. We're looking for teams who can help elevate what they are doing, but don't look at them to go try to acquire like Rockstar or EA or anything like that. He makes it pretty seemingly clear, like those mega deals are no longer happening. So you can just kind of consider that. When it comes to the handheld though, and I think this is what is going to grab most headlines, Phil Spencer pretty much acknowledges like, hey, we are going to do a handheld, but it's not going to be, don't expect this to be arriving next week. He says, the expectation is that we would do something in that category being the handheld. And he says, longer term, I love us building devices. And I think our team could do some real innovative work, but we want to be informed by learning and what's happening now. Meaning, effectively, there's a bunch of handheld consoles out there, right? You have the Switch. You also have a bunch on the gaming side, like the, Asus ROG Ally and some other stuff floating around out there. I think Lenovo's got one as well. There's the Steam Deck. And he wants to take, what can they learn from these things about building their own to try to just improve the experience, right? It seems pretty clear that Microsoft just can't build a handheld and push it out the door because that's not going to be enough to actually sell these things. Keep in mind, Microsoft has a very, I wouldn't even say rich, but poor history in shipping handhelds that actually sell in a meaningful volume. And so before Xbox goes and does this, you better believe that they've got all their ducks in a row and they think that they actually really have a hit on their hand. So yes, a handheld is more than likely coming from Team Xbox, but it's not coming anytime soon. As for what could be innovative, that's an interesting thought. I tend to think maybe they mean moving it over to the ARM architecture, potentially including an NPU and trying to do some on-device LLMs potentially, but all those things can be, at least as of right now, be very resource intensive, minus running an ARM, but like the generative AI sort of stuff doesn't really lend itself super well at this time to mobile devices. Now, one of the things I found most interesting was actually talking about their mobile store. Based on Phil Spencer's comments, it sounds like they maybe kind of put the chicken before the egg here. He says, Sarah Bond had announced the store in May with a planned release date of July. As we know, that did not happen. But staffers are still talking to mobile developers, including those responsible for Microsoft-owned Candy Crush and Call of Duty Mobile, to figure out a plan. As regulatory cases involving Apple and Alphabet and mobile work their way through the courts, blah, 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 Microsoft still doesn't have an effective way to get its own store on mobile stuff and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the store was supposed to come out in July based on some regulatory things that they thought were going to happen. Obviously, they didn't happen in the way that they expected. However, like they're still talking to their own developers like at Call of Duty and Candy Crush. That seems like something that should have already happened and they've already had a plan if they already were bringing a store to market, right? Sarah Bond said like, hey, this is coming in July. And then Phil Spencer here in November is like, yeah, we're still trying to figure out how we're going to do this. Like, what's the actual plan? Like, doesn't that seem a little backwards to everybody? I would have expected that these details would be like ironed out and they would know an exact path and strategy. And then he could have just been like, yeah, we're waiting for the courts to align with where we need to be to bring these products to market. Not like, nah, we're still like holding Teams calls and conference calls and getting in the conference room to try to figure it. Like that just didn't feel, I expected them. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I just expected them to be further along, considering that they've been trying to line up this strategy for literal years, waiting for this, the shoe to drop to where they could actually ship this stuff. And now they're in a place where they should be really close to shipping. And yet, here we are. So anyways, I think the biggest bombshell of this, though, is absolutely going to be tied to Phil Spencer saying, look, any game that ships on Xbox has the potential option to be on PlayStation. And he really goes in to say, he says, Spencer is pleased with the results. Microsoft will do more of that, he said, and won't rule out any game in Microsoft stable. I do not see sort of red lines in our portfolio that says thou must not, he said. It's too early to make any sort of decision on the next version of Halo, he said. Okay, that is the big one, right? Like, people will be like, well, look, he said Halo's not going over there. Like, here's the thing. That's not what he said. He said it's too early to make a decision on if they will bring it to PlayStation. Not can they, but if they will. And so to me, that is already sending things out, feelers out to see, like, how does the market react? What is going to be happening here? I think that I honestly think that there will be Halo titles on PlayStation at some point. I think that's just a given. When Microsoft says something, like, people are like shocked. Phil Spencer said in the springtime they were going to try this, and if it went well, they'd bring more. Guys, I've been following Microsoft long enough, and anybody who's followed this channel long enough knows that when Microsoft says something like this, they're already doing it. They've already been lining this up for a while. There are already games coming to PlayStation that haven't been announced that they're already working on that may have previously been an Xbox exclusive in another lifetime. When Microsoft says might do something or considering it, they already have plans to do this. It's whether or not they just say go. And so the fact that he calls out Halo specifically means that, like, it's like, yeah, they're already thinking about how they could bring Halo to another platform outside of Xbox to help recover the cost of that investment. And so I just think you have to assume at this point that anything Xbox has announced has already been considered for PlayStation at this point. And PC is already sort of watered down anyway, so it's already going to be on a PC, I think, as a given. It's just whether or not it ends up on the blue console at the end of the day. And that is the future, friends. Like, you don't have to like it, and I am not the messenger here. Well, I am the messenger. I'm literally the messenger. I am not Xbox here, but that is what they are broadcasting to the market, and that is what they're like, look, we put games on PlayStation. We made more money. That is what we're here on planet Earth to do, and for our corporate overlords is make more money. If we do this, we're going to make more money. Microsoft doesn't make more money on consoles. Let's be real clear. They might make some money on consoles, but they're not compared to software. That's where they make all their margin. And so, like, this is the future. This is the now. This is what's happening. So there's more to this, but I think the games going to PlayStation are it. So then becomes, what is the differentiator that Xbox can deliver that allows people to want to continue to stay in the Xbox ecosystem? I think Game Pass, candidly, is probably one of them, right? That is a super good value right now. If you're buying into that, you can get into it and get Black Ops, you'll get Indiana Jones, you get a bunch of other titles. So that might candidly be the differentiator that Microsoft is expecting going forward. Hardware, potentially. We'll see what happens in the hardware space. And speaking of hardware, Phil Spencer does dish a little on future consoles. He says, and I think he takes a dig at PlayStation here. He says, to reach new players, we have to be creative and adaptive of new business models, new devices, and new ways of access. We're not going to grow the market with a $1,000 console. Now, the PlayStation Pro was not a $1,000 console, but it's not cheap. It's $700 to get in the door, plus a disk drive, plus the stand, if you need the stand. So Phil Spencer, even though he doesn't say $700 consoles, it's like $1,000 consoles, although he could end up eating his own words on this, I guess, in the future. But they are going to continue to build consoles. Here's my sort of crazy thought that Microsoft might try to pursue. The current gen consoles are very close to PCs, and I've mentioned this before, that maybe just the next gen is a PC with certain restricted requirements, and then it just runs the Xbox hypervisor. Here's a creative thought. What if the next Xbox console, and I mean traditional under the TV one, is actually just a farmed out to PC vendor? So like Dell, HP, and those guys, they could build an Xbox that sits under there, and then from there, you go and run the software, and then that's just it. What if they do that? And then on the personal side, or the Xbox side, what they would do is they would build the handheld. So they farm out to Dell, HP, and those guys everything at the end of the day. And then they say, look, for the risky side, the console side, or the handheld side, we'll build that on ARM. So you have x80, it gets mucky with everything, but like traditional gaming console built by other vendors, Xbox takes the risk with the mobile and goes that way. And then Microsoft has less risk involved. I'm not quite sure what they will do, but $1,000 console is not in Xbox's future, so keep that in mind. Anyways, it was quite a spicy interview from Phil Spencer. I think it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers knowing that more games are headed off of the console. And so now it's in their bucket to determine how they're going to try to keep those players around or happy at this point. Because, yeah, the shift has been made. And so now we're just waiting for it to arrive. So there you go, friends. As always, make sure to keep it subscribed here because the BS on this channel is me.